The auditorium smelled like floor polish and nervous excitement. I smoothed down my graduation gown, waiting for my name to be called. Sarah Whitmore. At 38, I was older than most graduates by nearly 2 decades. My hands trembled as I clutched my diploma folder. This wasn't just a ceremony. It was proof I'd survived everything thrown at me. When my name echoed through the speakers, I walked across that stage like I was walking through fire. The crowd clapped politely. Then I saw him, my father Richard Whitmore, sitting stiff in the 3rd row. His presence knocked the air from my lungs. He hadn't come to anything in 18 years. Not my son's birth. Not his birthdays. Nothing. But here he was now, face blank as stone. I told myself it meant something. Maybe he'd finally see me. Maybe today would be different. I descended the stairs, diploma pressed against my chest, hope flickering dangerously in my throat. I shouldn't have hoped. Hope with my father always ended the same way. I found him near the exit, standing alone while other families hugged and took photos. My heart hammered. I approached slowly, practicing words I'd rehearsed for years. "Dad," I said softly. "I'm glad you came." He didn't smile. He leaned in close, and for one stupid second I thought he might hug me. Instead, his lips brushed my ear, and he whispered 6 words that sliced clean through me. "You only passed because they pitied you." The world tilted. My vision blurred. I stepped back, mouth open but empty. He straightened his suit jacket like he'd just commented on the weather. Before I could breathe, a voice cut through the noise behind us. "Excuse me, Colonel Whitmore." Dean Walters stood there, sharp-eyed and calm. My father turned, forcing a polite smile. The dean's expression didn't shift. "I couldn't help overhearing," he said, voice carrying farther than it should. "I wanted to clarify something." The crowd around us started to quiet. People turned. My father's jaw tightened. Dean Walters stepped closer, speaking louder now. Not shouting, just clear. "Sarah didn't pass because of pity," he said. "She passed because her thesis on behavioral trauma in institutional settings was published in the Journal of Applied Psychology. She passed because the State Research Board offered her a consulting position before she even graduated." Silence spread like spilled water. My father's face drained of color. Phones appeared. Someone whispered. Dean Walters smiled gently at me, then looked back at my father. "Pity doesn't earn publications, Colonel. Excellence does." He walked away. The applause started slow, then built until it roared. My father stood frozen, humiliation painted across his face. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt cold. Something inside me clicked into place. A decision I didn't know I was making. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night, the family gathered at my brother Mark's house for his promotion celebration. I wasn't invited, but my son Ethan was. He came home late, face tight with anger. "They didn't mention you once," he said. "Not once, Mom. But Grandpa toasted Uncle Mark 3 times." I sat at our small kitchen table, staring at nothing. Ethan showed me his phone. "But this is everywhere." A video played. Dean Walters' words, my father's frozen face, and the crowd's reaction. It had been shared hundreds of times already. "People are calling him out in the comments," Ethan said. "Saying he's cruel." I felt a strange mix of validation and dread. My father had spent his whole life controlling his image. Retired colonel, successful businessman, respected leader. Public humiliation would destroy him. And he'd blame me. He always blamed me. I told Ethan to put the phone away. But I couldn't stop replaying the dean's words. Excellence. For the first time, someone had called me excellent. 3 days later, Dean Walters called. "Sarah, I have an opportunity for you." His voice was warm and professional. "A corporate firm needs a behavioral consultant. They've had some internal issues, employee complaints and workplace culture problems. They want someone with your expertise." I gripped the phone tighter. "Which firm?" There was a pause. "Whitmore Industries." My breath caught. That was Mark's company. My father consulted their part-time, still pulling strings even in retirement. Dean Walters continued. I recommended you specifically. They agreed. The position starts next week. I should have said no. It felt like a trap, like walking straight into the lion's den. But something fierce and reckless rose in my chest. I'll take it, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment. This wasn't coincidence. This was fate handing me a weapon. The question was whether I'd use it. Monday morning, I walked into Whitmore Industries wearing my best blazer and my calmest face. The building was glass and steel, cold and modern. Inside, everything gleamed. Polished floors, expensive art, and the hum of power and money. I didn't belong here. But I didn't care. The receptionist led me to a conference room. Mark walked in first, then froze. Sarah! His shock was genuine. Behind him came my father, still consulting despite his so-called retirement. His expression hardened instantly. Dean Walters didn't mention who he was recommending, Mark said carefully. This is unexpected. My father said nothing. He just stared at me like I was a problem that needed solving. I smiled politely. I'm here to help improve workplace culture. I'll need access to HR files, complaint records, and employee feedback. My voice didn't waver. My father's jaw clenched. But let him be uncomfortable. I was done shrinking. They gave me a small office on the 3rd floor. It had a desk, a computer, and a dying plant someone had abandoned. I spent the first 2 days reviewing files. The company looked clean on the surface. Good benefits, diversity initiatives, and employee satisfaction surveys. But underneath, cracks appeared. I noticed patterns in the HR complaints. Harassment cases that were opened, then closed within days. Always the same investigator. Always the same result. Resolved internally. One name kept showing up. Melissa Crane. She'd filed 4 separate complaints over 2 years. Each one was dismissed. I printed everything, backed it up on a personal drive, and kept my face neutral. When Mark stopped by to check on me, I smiled and said the files looked thorough. He seemed relieved. My father didn't visit. He was avoiding me. That told me everything I needed to know. He knew there were secrets here. And he knew I was getting close. On Friday, a secretary named Brenda knocked on my door. She was older, kind-faced, with tired eyes. Can I talk to you? She asked quietly. I gestured for her to sit. She glanced at the door, then leaned in. You should know, your father still runs this place. Not officially, but everyone knows. Mark listens to him. Always. I nodded slowly. What happens to people who don't? They leave, Brenda said. Or they're forced out. There was a manager last year who questioned some financial reports. She was gone in a week. HR said it was performance issues, but we all knew. Thanked her. After she left, I sat there feeling the weight of what I was uncovering. This wasn't just about a few bad complaints. This was institutional rot. And my father was the infection at the center. I thought about walking away. It would be easier, safer. But then I remembered his whisper. Pity. I opened another file. That weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about Melissa Crane. I found her contact information in an old employee directory and sent a careful email. I'm reviewing past HR cases. Would you be willing to talk? She responded within an hour. We met at a coffee shop far from the office. Melissa was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with dark circles under her eyes. She looked at me warily. Why are you asking about this now? Because something's wrong, I said honestly. And I think you know what it is. She studied my face for a long moment. Then she pulled a USB drive from her purse and slid it across the table. This is everything. Emails, recorded conversations, and documentation I kept because I knew they'd bury it. The harassment came from Andrew Kemp, your father's protege. When I reported it, your father himself told me to drop it. Said it would ruin my career. I took the drive with shaking hands. Why give this to me? Because you're his daughter, Melissa said quietly. And maybe you'll actually do something. I spent Sunday reviewing the contents of that USB drive. It was worse than I'd imagined. Messages from Andrew Kemp that made my skin crawl. Emails from my father instructing HR to handle this quietly. Financial records showing payoffs disguised as severance packages. A whole system designed to protect abusers and silence victims. I thought about my own past, being thrown out at 20, pregnant and alone, sleeping in my car between night shifts. My father's voice on the phone. You made your choice. Live with it. I'd spent 18 years clawing my way back from that pit. And here he was, still pushing people into darkness while pretending to be respectable. Monday morning I called Dean Walters. I need advice, I said. Not as a consultant. As someone who understands how power works. He listened to everything. Then he said something that changed my approach entirely. You don't beat men like that by shouting, Sarah. You let their own arrogance do the work. I hung up and started planning. In the next staff meeting, I presented a proposal for new ethics protocols. Nothing aggressive. Just suggestions about transparent complaint processes, third-party investigators, regular audits. My father sat in the back, arms crossed. When I finished, he spoke up. This sounds expensive and unnecessary. Our current system works fine. Several executives nodded. But a few didn't. I saw doubt flicker across their faces. I smiled calmly. I'm just suggesting we align with industry best practices. Unless there's a reason we shouldn't. The room went quiet. My father's face reddened. Mark jumped in quickly. We'll consider it. Thank you, Sarah. But the seed was planted. People were starting to wonder why my father was so defensive. Over the next 2 weeks, I made more suggestions in meetings. Small, reasonable, and impossible to argue against without looking suspicious. Each time my father resisted. Each time more people noticed. 2 months in, my father invited the family to dinner at his estate. I almost declined, but Ethan convinced me to go. You should see him squirm, he said with the confidence of 17. The house was exactly as I remembered. Cold, elegant, and filled with awards and military photos. Mark's wife chatted nervously. My father presided at the head of the table like a king. When dinner was served, he raised his glass. To Mark, whose leadership continues to honor the Whitmore name. No mention of me. Not even a glance. Later, when Mark talked about company changes, I mentioned the ethics review I was conducting. My father laughed, sharp and dismissive. Our morality mascot, he said. Making sure we all play nice. I set down my fork carefully. I'm just cleaning up the messes people pretend not to see. The table froze. My father's smile vanished. Mark coughed. I kept my expression pleasant, but inside I felt the power shift. He couldn't dismiss me anymore. Not publicly. That week, Ethan found something while helping me organize old boxes. A letter, yellowed with age, addressed to the scholarship committee at my first college. It was from my father. I read it 3 times before the words made sense. Sarah lacks the discipline and focus required for higher education. I recommend redirecting these funds to more suitable candidates. My hand shook. He'd sabotaged my scholarship. At 18, I'd lost my funding and had to drop out. Thought it was bad grades, bad luck. But it was him. He'd engineered my failure to keep me dependent, to prove I wasn't good enough. I showed the letter to Ethan. His face went white with rage. He destroyed your life on purpose. No, I said quietly, folding the letter. He tried to. There's a difference. But inside something hardened into steel. This wasn't just about Whitmore Industries anymore. This was about 20 years of calculated cruelty. And it was ending. I made copies of everything, the USB drive, the complaint files, and the scholarship letter. Then I contacted a journalist I'd met through Dean Walters, someone known for investigating corporate corruption. I didn't give her everything. Just enough to make her curious. There might be a story here, I said carefully. About a company covering up harassment to protect its reputation. 2 weeks later, her first article appeared online. It didn't name Whitmore Industries directly, but it mentioned a mid-sized firm with military leadership and systemic suppression of employee complaints. The business community started buzzing. Investors asked questions. The board called emergency meetings. My father stormed into my office without knocking. "This was you," he hissed. "You leaked this." I looked up from my computer, calm. "I don't know what you're talking about." "End this," he said, voice shaking with fury. "Or I'll ruin you again. I've done it before." I stood slowly, meeting his eyes. "You can't ruin what you didn't build, Dad. Everything I have, I earned myself. You made sure of that." He slammed the door so hard the walls shook. But he left, and I kept working. The State Research Board opened a formal inquiry into Whitmore Industries. Dean Walters was appointed as the ethics compliance overseer. Neutral, respected, impossible to intimidate. My father tried to block it, but the board overruled him. For the first time in his life, his name wasn't enough. Employees started coming forward, encouraged by the investigation. More stories of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. Each one added weight to the case building against the company's leadership. Mark called me late one night, voice cracking. "Did you do this to hurt me? To hurt the family?" "I did this to stop the hurt," I said quietly. "You just happened to be in the way." "He's my father too, Sarah. Then you know what he's capable of." The line went silent. Neither of us hung up for a long time. Finally, Mark whispered, "I'm sorry. For everything. It wasn't enough. But it was something." The investigation moved fast. Dean Walters was thorough, interviewing dozens of current and former employees. Andrew Kemp was suspended pending criminal charges. The HR director resigned. Stock prices dropped. My father's carefully built empire started to crack. In a closed-door session, I testified before the inquiry board. I presented the files, the emails, the pattern of cover-ups. I spoke calmly, factually, without emotion. Every word was documented. Cameras recorded everything for legal purposes. My father sat behind me in the observer section. I didn't look at him once. When the session ended, reporters were waiting outside. They shouted questions. I said nothing, just walked to my car with my head high. That night, the local news ran a segment. Whitmore Industries under fire. Family drama or corporate corruption. They showed my graduation video again. My father's whisper, Dean Walters' rebuttal. The contrast was devastating. The public saw it now. The cruelty wasn't private anymore. 2 weeks later, the board made its decision. They forced my father into early retirement with no consulting privileges. Mark was required to attend ethics training and answer to a new oversight committee. Andrew Kemp faced criminal charges. The company agreed to a settlement fund for victims. The day the announcement went public, I sat in my office watching the news coverage. My father's lawyer read a statement. Colonel Whitmore regrets any oversights during his tenure and wishes the company well. No apology. No acknowledgement of harm. Just cold, empty corporate speak. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. Victory didn't erase the years of pain. It didn't give me back the time I'd lost. But it did something else. It ended his power. He couldn't hurt anyone else now. That had to be enough. I packed my things and submitted my resignation. My work here was done. Mark came to see me before I left. His eyes were red, exhausted. "I didn't know how bad it was," he said. "I knew Dad was controlling, but I didn't think he'd." He trailed off. I handed him a copy of the scholarship letter. He sabotaged me 20 years ago. Ruined my education so I'd stay dependent. "Did you know?" Mark read it, face crumbling. "No. God, Sarah, no." He looked up, tears streaming. "I thought you dropped out because you were pregnant. He said you chose that life." "He lied," I said simply. "He always lied." Mark sank into a chair. For the first time I saw my brother clearly, not as the golden child, but as another person my father had manipulated. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for not seeing it. For not protecting you." "You couldn't protect me," I said gently. "But you can do better now." He nodded and something shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. The weeks after were strange. I'd prepared for battle so long that peace felt foreign. I didn't know what to do with my days anymore. Ethan noticed me staring out windows, restless and hollow. "You won, Mom," he said. "Shouldn't you be happy?" "Winning doesn't erase the pain," I told him. "It just transforms it into something you can live with." Dean Walters called and offered me a part-time teaching position at the university. An Intro to Behavioral Psychology course. "You've got real-world experience students need to hear," he said. I accepted, grateful for something to fill the emptiness. Teaching was different from consulting. Quieter. Kinder. I liked it. I started to remember that not everything had to be a war. Some things could just be normal. It was a strange, fragile feeling, like learning to walk again after years on my knees. 6 months passed. The scandal faded from headlines. Whitmore Industries rebuilt under new leadership. Mark sent occasional texts, updates, apologies, small attempts at connection. I responded politely but distantly. Trust takes longer to rebuild than empires. Then one Tuesday my father appeared at my lecture hall. I was mid-sentence when I saw him in the back row, looking small and frail in a way I'd never seen. I stumbled over my words, then recovered. After class he waited by the door. "Can we talk?" His voice was quiet, stripped of its usual authority. We walked to a bench outside. He stared at his hands. "I came to apologize," he said. "For everything. The things I said. The things I did." Waited. He continued, voice cracking. "I thought I was making you strong, teaching you discipline. But I was just cruel." He looked at me, eyes wet. "You were always stronger than Mark." Me. I think I resented that. It wasn't enough. But it was honest. I didn't cry. Didn't hug him. I just sat there, feeling the weight of 20 years between us. "You can't undo it," I said finally. "The damage is permanent." "I know," he whispered. "But I don't need your approval anymore," I continued. "That's what you never understood. I didn't achieve things to prove you wrong. I did it to prove myself right." He nodded slowly, defeated. "You've become someone remarkable. Despite me. Because of me," I corrected gently. "Every time you pushed me down, I learned to climb back up. You taught me resilience by making me need it." I stood to leave. He grabbed my hand. Desperate, fragile. "Can you forgive me?" I looked down at him. The man who'd haunted my nightmares for decades suddenly looked like what he was. Old, afraid, and powerless. "Maybe someday," I said. "But not today." I pulled my hand away and walked back to my classroom. He didn't follow. A year after graduation, I received a formal invitation. The university wanted me to deliver the commencement speech for the next graduating class. My hand shook as I read it. That stage. Those memories. I almost declined immediately. Ethan found me staring at the letter. "You're going to say yes," he said confidently. "I don't know if I can stand up there again," I admitted. "Mom, you stood up to Grandpa in a courtroom. You exposed a company's corruption. You rebuilt your entire life from nothing. You can definitely handle a speech." He grinned. "Besides, you earned this. Not despite what happened, because of it." I thought about it for days. Then I called Dean Walters and accepted. "What should I talk about?" I asked. "Tell them the truth," he said simply. "Tell them about resilience. About worth. About not letting anyone define you but yourself." So I started writing. Every word felt like closing a chapter I'd been living in for too long. The morning of the ceremony, I stood backstage in a doctoral robe. I defended my dissertation 3 months earlier. My reflection in the mirror showed someone I barely recognized. Confident. Free. Ethan adjusted my hood. You look like a superhero, he teased. I feel like I'm going to throw up, I admitted. That's just fear leaving your body, he said, quoting something I'd told him years ago. We laughed, and the tension broke. When they called my name, I walked onto that stage. The same stage where my father had whispered his poison. The same stage where my life had cracked open. But this time was different. I stood behind the podium and looked out at hundreds of faces. Students, families, hope, and fear mixed together. And then I saw him. My father, sitting near the back, silent and small. Eyes met. I didn't look away. I began to speak. Resilience isn't about never falling, I started. It's about deciding to stand back up. Again and again, no matter how many times the world tells you to stay down. I told them about dropping out at 20, about working night shifts and raising a child alone, about returning to school 18 years later, terrified and exhausted. Someone once told me I only succeeded because people pitied me. I said, voice steady. He was wrong. Pity is passive. What I received was opportunity. What I gave was effort. The difference matters. I talked about worth. How no one can give it to you or take it away. It's something you build in the quiet moments when no one's watching. You'll meet people who try to make you small, I said. Family, bosses, friends, even strangers. They'll whisper doubts. They'll question your achievements. Don't let them rewrite your story. The auditorium was silent, completely focused. I felt the power of truth in my throat. You are not defined by who failed you, I concluded. You're defined by how you rise anyway. To rise. Keep rising. The world needs what only you can give. The applause was thunderous. I stepped back, blinking against sudden tears, and let the sound wash over me like absolution. After the ceremony, graduates and families flooded the courtyard. I posed for photos, shook hands, and accepted congratulations. Then the crowd parted, and my father stood there, leaning heavily on a cane I hadn't noticed before. He approached slowly, each step deliberate. When he reached me, he stopped. That was a powerful speech, he said. There was no sarcasm in his voice. Just something that sounded like regret. Thank you, I replied evenly. He hesitated, then said the words I'd waited 20 years to hear. You made me proud, Sarah. You always should have. I looked at him, really looked. The man who'd controlled my childhood, poisoned my 20s, and shadowed my 30s was just a man now. Aging. Fallible. Human. You were wrong about pity, I said gently. It wasn't pity that got me here. It was perseverance. His eyes filled. He nodded slowly. I know that now. I touched his arm briefly. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Then I turned toward Ethan, who was waiting with my diploma and a camera. Come on, Mom, he called. Let's get a picture by the fountain. I walked toward my son, sunlight warming my face. Behind me, my father stood alone in the crowd. I didn't look back. Some chapters close quietly, with no dramatic ending, just the soft sound of a door shutting and footsteps walking away. I'd spent decades proving myself to a man who couldn't see me. Now I was done. The only person I needed to prove anything to was the woman I'd become. The one who survived, who persevered, who refused to stay small. As the afternoon light spilled gold across the courtyard, I realized something simple and profound. I was finally free. Not because my father apologized or because justice was served, but because I'd stopped waiting for permission to value myself. I took Ethan's hand, smiled at the camera, and let the moment capture what words never could. A woman who'd walked through fire and came out holding her own light. The whisper that tried to destroy me had instead become the spark that forged me. And that, more than any diploma or speech or vindication, was the real victory. No pity needed. Just strength, dignity, and the quiet knowledge that I'd earned every single step of this journey.